Welcome back, friends. Today, we're counting down the 5 most popular aircraft used in World War II. These weren't just machines. They were the planes that everyone knew by name, the ones that filled the skies and captured imaginations. From the deserts of North Africa to the islands of the Pacific, from the English Channel to the skies over Berlin, these 5 aircraft changed aviation history forever. So let's start our countdown. Coming in at number 5, we have the Supermarine Spitfire. Now, if you grew up in Britain or followed the news from England in 1940, you know this name. The Spitfire wasn't just an airplane, it was a symbol of hope. Designed by Reginald Mitchell in the mid-1930s, this British fighter became famous around the world during the Battle of Britain. When you saw those distinctive elliptical wings cutting through the sky, you knew something special was up there. Here's what made the Spitfire special. It was powered by the legendary Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, producing over 1,000 horsepower in early models and reaching up to 2,000 horsepower in later versions. That engine gave it a top speed of 360 miles per hour, and it could climb to 34,000 feet. But numbers don't tell the whole story. The Spitfire could turn tighter than just about anything the Germans had. When a Messerschmitt pilot tried to follow a Spitfire through a turn, he often found himself looking at tracer fire coming his way instead. The plane was beloved by its pilots. They'd tell you it felt like the Spitfire was part of them, responding to the slightest touch. During the Battle of Britain, Spitfires were often sent up to take on German fighters, while the Hawker Hurricanes went after the bombers. Though Hurricanes actually shot down more enemy aircraft during that battle, the Spitfire became the star. Why? Because it could fight the Bf-109 on equal terms at high altitude, and that's where the real battles happened. More than 20,000 Spitfires rolled off the production lines between 1938 and 1947. They served in every theater of the war, from the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of Burma, from the frozen skies over Russia to the Pacific Islands. The Spitfire kept getting better too. By war's end, the Griffon-powered versions could reach 440 miles per hour. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill said it best when he spoke of those young RAF pilots. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. And when he said it, many of those few were flying Spitfires. Moving to number 4 on our countdown, let me tell you about the airplane that changed everything. The one that made victory possible. I'm talking about the North American P-51 Mustang. In 1943, American bomber crews flying over Germany faced a serious problem. The mighty B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators would head deep into enemy territory, but their fighter escorts could only go so far before running out of fuel. The German fighters would wait, watching. The moment the escorts turned back, they'd attack. Something had to change. And it did, thanks to a fighter that almost didn't happen. The Mustang's story started in 1940 when the British asked North American Aviation to build P-40 fighters. Instead, the company's chief designer, Dutch Kindleberger, said they could build something better in the same amount of time. The British took a chance, and 117 days later, the first Mustang prototype was ready. But here's the thing. Those early Mustangs, powered by Allison engines, were good at low altitude, but struggled up high where the bombers flew. Then somebody had a brilliant idea. What if we put the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine in the Mustang? The same engine that powered the Spitfire. The result was magic. The P-51B, with its Packard-built Merlin engine, could fly higher, faster, and further than anything else. With drop tanks, it could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. Think about that. Berlin. Over 1,000 miles from England. For the first time, American bombers had protection for their entire mission. Hermann Goering, the head of the German Luftwaffe, knew what this meant. When he saw Mustangs over Berlin, he said, "I knew the jig was up." He was right. The P-51 Mustang could do 440 miles per hour and climb to 41,000 feet. It was armed with 650 caliber machine guns and could carry bombs or rockets too. But what really mattered was the range. With external fuel tanks, a Mustang could fly 1,650 miles. That was unheard of for a fighter. And it could fight. The Mustang had a kill-to-loss ratio of 19-1. That means for every Mustang shot down, 19 German planes were destroyed. Over 15,000 were built between 1940 and 1945, and they're credited with destroying nearly 5,000 enemy aircraft in Europe alone. The famous Tuskegee Airmen, America's first black military pilots, flew Mustangs. They earned a reputation for never losing a bomber they were escorting. Not one. Their red-tailed P-51s became known as protectors, and bomber crews specifically requested them. At number 3, we have one of the most recognizable aircraft ever built. You've seen the pictures. Formations of silver bombers stretching across the sky, leaving white contrails behind them. Hundreds of them at a time heading into the heart of Nazi Germany. Those were B-17 flying fortresses, and they were an impressive sight to behold. The Boeing B-17 got its name from a newspaper reporter who saw it at a 1935 demonstration and called it a flying fortress because of all the machine guns bristling from it. Boeing liked the name so much they trademarked it. And boy, was it fitting. The final version, the B-17G, had 13 50 caliber machine guns. There were guns in the nose, guns in the tail, guns on top, guns on the belly, guns on the sides. When 36 B-17s flew in formation, they could put up a wall of lead that German fighters had to fly through. It was like sailing into a storm of bullets. These bombers were big, over 74 feet long, with a wingspan of nearly 104 feet. They were powered by 4 Wright Cyclone engines, each producing 1,200 horsepower. Fully loaded, a B-17 weighed 65,000 pounds. That's the weight of about 22 automobiles. And they could carry 4,000 to 8,000 pounds of bombs, depending on how far they had to fly. But here's what made the B-17 legendary. It could take an incredible amount of punishment and still bring its crew home. There are stories of B-17s returning to base with engines shot out, huge holes in the fuselage, the tail barely hanging on. One famous B-17, called All-American, made it back with its entire rear fuselage, nearly severed by a collision with a German fighter. The crew had to crawl forward on their hands and knees to keep the weight balanced. It took 10 men to fly a B-17. The pilot and co-pilot up front, the bombardier and navigator in the nose, a flight engineer and radio operator in the middle, and 4 gunners, including the fellow in the ball turret under the belly, a tiny plexiglass sphere where he'd curl up with his guns. These men faced challenging conditions. They faced flak, German anti-aircraft fire that filled the sky with explosive bursts. They faced temperatures of 50 degrees below zero at altitude. Many missions lasted 8 hours or more. The 8th Air Force, based in England, relied heavily on the B-17 throughout the campaign. Those flying fortresses dropped over 640,000 tons of bombs on German industry, helping to cripple the Nazi war machine. A total of 12,731 B-17s were built. Today, only about 40 survive, and fewer than a dozen can still fly. Each one is a living memorial to the men who flew them and the service they gave. At number 2, we need to talk about the other side. Because to understand the air war, you have to understand what our boys were up against. And nothing represented German air power more than the Messerschmitt Bf 109. This was the Luftwaffe's workhorse, their main fighter from the beginning of the war to the very end. More Bf 109s were built than any other fighter aircraft in history. Over 33,000 of them. That's more than any Allied fighter. It's the most produced fighter plane ever made. Designed by Willy Messerschmitt in 1934, the Bf 109 first flew in September 1935. It was small, angular, and deadly. The idea was simple. Take the most powerful engine available and wrap the smallest, lightest airframe around it. Then add guns. The Germans tested it in the Spanish Civil War, starting in 1936, and it dominated the skies. When World War II began, the Bf 109 was already a proven killer. The version that fought in the Battle of Britain, the Bf 109E, could do 350 miles per hour and climb to 36,000 feet. It was armed with 2 machine guns in the nose and a 20-millimeter cannon firing through the propeller hub. Some versions added cannons in the wings. That cannon was devastating. One good burst could blow a wing off. The 109 could outclimb and outdive the Spitfire, though the Spitfire could outturn it. Against the Hurricane, the 109 was faster and could climb better, but the Hurricane was tougher and could turn tighter. It was all about tactics. German pilots learned to dive down, make one quick pass, and then climb away before the British fighters could respond. But the 109 had a weakness. It didn't have much range. Over Britain, German pilots only had about 20 minutes of fighting time before they had to turn back or risk running out of fuel. That limited range was a significant tactical disadvantage. As the war went on, the 109 kept getting better engines and heavier armament. The final version, the K model, had a 2,000 horsepower engine and could reach 450 miles per hour. But by then it faced P-51 Mustangs with better range and P-47 Thunderbolts that could take more punishment. The top German ace, Erich Hartmann, flew a Bf 109 and shot down 352 aircraft, all on the Eastern Front against the Soviets. No pilot in history has more confirmed victories. That tells you how good the 109 was in the right hands. For American bomber crews, the 109 was a formidable adversary. When someone yelled 109s at 3 o'clock high, everyone knew it meant a serious engagement was coming. These German fighters would slash through bomber formations with their cannons, targeting engines and fuel tanks. Production of the Bf 109 continued until the end of the war and even beyond. Spain kept building them until 1958, 13 years after the war ended. That's how good the basic design was. And now, our number 1 most popular plane used in World War II. Let's head to the Pacific. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor. When those Japanese planes came roaring in to attack the American fleet, the fighters providing cover were Mitsubishi A6M Zeros. And for the first year and a half of the Pacific War, the Zero was the most talked about and most respected fighter in that theater. The Zero was designed by Jiro Horikoshi to meet incredibly demanding requirements from the Japanese Navy. They wanted a fighter with long range for operations over the vast Pacific Ocean. They wanted speed and maneuverability, and they wanted it to be able to operate from aircraft carriers. It seemed impossible, but Horikoshi pulled it off. The secret was weight, or rather, the lack of it. The Zero was built from a special aluminum alloy that was strong but incredibly light. Everything was made as light as possible. The result was a fighter that weighed just 3,700 pounds empty. Compare that to an American F-4F Wildcat at 5,900 pounds. That lightweight gave the Zero unbelievable agility. It could turn tighter than anything the Allies had. In a dogfight, if you tried to turn with a Zero, you'd lose every time. It would just keep turning. And suddenly, you'd see tracer fire coming at you. The Zero had good armament too. Two 20mm cannons in the wings and two 7.7mm machine guns in the nose. Those cannons packed a punch, and with a range of 1,900 miles with drop tanks, the Zero could fly further than any other single-engine fighter in the world. When the war started, Zeros dominated. At Pearl Harbor, 105 of them provided fighter cover. In the Philippines, in the Dutch East Indies, in Singapore, everywhere the Japanese attacked, Zeros ruled the sky. They shot down everything they met: Chinese fighters, British Hurricanes, American P-40s, and P-39s. Nothing could touch them. The Japanese claimed a kill ratio of 12-1 in the early months. But that light weight that made the Zero so maneuverable was also its weakness. To save weight, Horikoshi left out armor protection for the pilot. He left out self-sealing fuel tanks. This made the Zero much more vulnerable to damage than heavily armored Allied fighters. Allied pilots learned this. They developed new tactics. Instead of trying to dogfight, they'd dive down from above, get one good burst into the Zero, and then zoom away before it could turn on them. Hit and run, boom and zoom. Don't turn with them. When the Americans introduced new fighters like the F-6F Hellcat and the F-4U Corsair in 1943, the Zero's advantage disappeared. These American fighters were bigger, heavier, more powerful. They could take punishment the Zero couldn't. And American pilots had learned how to fight them. By 1944, the Zero was outclassed, but Japan kept building them because they had nothing better. In the final year of the war, Zeros were used in various roles, including desperate defensive missions. About 1,000 Zeros were built during the war. Today, only a handful still exist, and even fewer can fly. But veterans who fought against them will never forget that distinctive profile and the respect they had for the skill of the pilots who flew them. So there you have it, our countdown of the 5 most popular aircraft used in World War II. From number 5, the graceful Spitfire, to our number 1, the legendary Zero. Each one tells a different story, but together they show how air power changed everything about how wars are fought. The Spitfire saved Britain during the Battle of Britain and became a symbol of resistance. The P-51 Mustang made strategic bombing possible, allowing America to strike deep into German territory. The B-17 Flying Fortress delivered those strikes with determination and resilience. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 showed the world what a modern fighter could do and earned the respect of every pilot who faced it. And the Zero demonstrated that the Pacific War would be decided in the air as much as on the ground or at sea. These weren't just machines. They were flown by real men. Young men, most of them. Men in their early 20s who climbed into cramped cockpits or crowded into bomber fuselages and flew off to face incredible challenges. Some of them your neighbors, some of them your brothers, your fathers, your friends. The pilots who flew Spitfires over England, the bomber crews in their B-17s, watching the formations hold together, the Mustang pilots who flew 7-hour missions all the way to Berlin and back, the German pilots in their 109s, displaying remarkable skill and courage, the Japanese pilots in their Zeros, flying with dedication for their nation. These planes were tools, but the men who flew them were heroes, and we should never forget what they accomplished. Today, when you see one of these planes at an air show, engines roaring, the sound takes you back, doesn't it? That distinctive rumble of a Merlin engine, the sight of a Spitfire rolling across the sky with those graceful elliptical wings, the thunder of 4 radial engines as a B-17 lumbers past. These sounds connect us to a remarkable time in history. Maybe you remember watching the contrails over England as a child, or maybe you were one of the lucky ones who got to see your father or grandfather come home from the war and heard his stories. Stories about dogfights over the Channel, about bomber runs through challenging conditions, about camaraderie and courage. These 5 aircraft, the Spitfire at number 5, the Mustang at number 4, the Flying Fortress at number 3, the Messerschmitt at number 2, and the Zero at number 1. They're more than just historical artifacts now. They're monuments. Monuments to human ingenuity, to courage, to dedication. Engineers and workers built them. Test pilots flew them first and worked out the kinks. And then young warriors took them into combat. The numbers are staggering when you think about them. Over 20,000 Spitfires, more than 15,000 Mustangs, nearly 13,000 Flying Fortresses, over 33,000 Messerschmitts, nearly 11,000 Zeros, hundreds of thousands of airplanes built in just a few years, millions of missions flown, thousands upon thousands of brave young men who served with honor. Because of them, because of what they did in those planes, the world remained free. Democracy survived. Tyranny was defeated. That's not an exaggeration. That's history. So the next time you see one of these warbirds at an air show or in a museum, stop for a moment. Listen to that engine. Look at those worn control surfaces and imagine a 22-year-old pilot sitting there, his hands on the stick, his finger on the trigger. Think about the courage it took to climb into that cockpit and fly into combat. Remember the service that was given. These planes and the men who flew them, they changed the world. We owe them our respect and gratitude, and we must never forget.